You told yourself today was the day, not tomorrow. Today, you clear the desk, open a file you've been avoiding for 3 weeks, and then your hands just stop. Not because you got distracted, not because you stopped caring. Something in your body pulled the plug before your mind even noticed it happening. 10 minutes later, you're rearranging your desktop icons. An hour later, you're deep cleaning a drawer nobody will ever open. The file sits there, exactly as untouched as it was this morning. Cursor blinking in the same spot it was blinking 2 hours ago. Underneath the guilt, a quieter thought starts running. Maybe you're just lazy. Maybe this is who you are. It isn't. So what was that if not laziness? What happened to you today is not a discipline problem. It has nothing to do with how badly you wanted this, and nothing to do with your character. Your body made a decision faster than your mind could weigh in, and it made that decision to protect you, not from the task itself, from something the task was standing in for. Why would your body do that to you? Because somewhere in your nervous system, stillness has been filed away as a survival strategy, one you didn't choose, one you can't simply decide to stop using, no matter how many productivity systems you've tried. You already know that much. You felt the gap before between wanting something and being able to move toward it, and no article about willpower ever closed that gap for long, because willpower was never the thing missing. Watch how this shows up across an ordinary week. A message from a client sits unread in your inbox, not because you're busy, but because opening it means finding out whether the project actually went well. Right now, not knowing feels almost like still having a chance. A friend keeps inviting you to the gym. You keep having a reason, a real one, every single time. Somehow none of them are true, and somewhere underneath the excuse making you already know that, it was never the workout itself. It's being watched attempting something you might not be good at yet. The business idea you've been talking about for 2 years is still just talk. The second someone asks how it's going, something tightens in your chest before you've even answered. Does that sound like laziness to you? There's a health screening you keep meaning to book, the one you tell yourself you'll get to next month. As long as it stays unbooked, there's nothing to actually find out. Not knowing, it turns out, can feel safer than knowing. By now, a pattern should be forming. It has nothing to do with how hard the task actually is. A 2-minute email is easier than a 2-year business decision, and yet the same stillness shows up for both, because difficulty was never what triggered it in the first place. Then there's a conversation with your partner, the one you both already know needs to happen. You've opened your mouth to start 12 times and closed it 12 times, telling yourself you're waiting for the right moment. The right moment has walked past you 11 times already. None of these are about laziness. Look closely and they share one thing. Each one carries a small, private risk of being seen. Seen failing. Seen wanting something and not getting it. Seen as the person who tried and came up short, in a way that will confirm something you've quietly suspected about yourself for years. That's the trigger, not the task, the exposure underneath it. Why would exposure matter so much that your own body would sabotage you to avoid it? Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux spent decades studying the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, and found something most of us were never taught in school. That circuit cannot tell the difference between a physical threat and a social one. It doesn't check whether the danger is real before it fires. It only checks whether the danger is possible. To the amygdala, the risk of humiliation reads the same as the risk of an actual predator. There's a reason it works that way. For most of human history, being cast out from the group wasn't a bruised ego. It was closer to a death sentence. A body seen failing in front of the tribe risked losing standing it needed to survive. So exposure got wired into the same alarm system as physical danger, long before email or deadlines existed. Your body isn't malfunctioning when it treats a client message like a threat. It's running code that kept people alive for longer than recorded history exists. So when a task carries identity risk, when doing it badly would mean something about who you are and not just what you did, your body responds the way it would to something it can't outrun. What does that response actually feel like from the inside? Here's where most people get confused, because it doesn't feel like the fear they're expecting. Psychiatrist Stephen Porges spent his career mapping what happens next and found the nervous system has more settings for danger than the one most people know about. There's a familiar one first: a racing heart, restless hands, a body coiled and ready to run or fight. Porges called it the sympathetic response, and it's built for a threat you can still do something about. But when a threat feels too big to fight and too close to escape, the nervous system doesn't stay in that alarm state. It drops into something older. Porges called this second setting the dorsal vagal state, the body's oldest survival response, older than fight, older than flight. Energy drops. Motivation disappears. The body goes still, the same way it would if stillness were the only thing keeping alive. It doesn't feel like danger. It feels like nothing, like fog, like your own motivation quietly declining to show up. Trauma researcher Peter Levine watched this exact response play out in the wild, long before he ever studied it in people. Prey animals going completely limp the instant a predator's jaws close around them. He called it tonic immobility, a freeze so total the animal appears dead. It isn't surrender. It's a last resort strategy, one that evolved because a predator often loses interest in something that no longer struggles, and because pain registers differently in a body that has already gone still. Sometimes stillness was the only door left. You still carry that same ancient setting. It just fires at your desk now instead of in a field. What if the problem was never about time management at all? Researcher Timothy Pychyl spent over a decade studying procrastination at Carleton University and reached a conclusion that upends most of what people believe about their own stalling. It isn't a scheduling failure. It's an emotion regulation failure. You're not avoiding a deadline. You're avoiding a feeling, and your body has decided the fastest way to avoid that feeling is to avoid whatever might produce it. No amount of better calendars fixes a problem that was never about calendars. This is exactly why it tends to hit capable people the hardest. The less you've invested in being good at something, the less there is to lose by being seen doing it badly. But when you've spent years building a reputation, with yourself as much as anyone else, for being someone who follows through, the stakes attached to one visible failure go up. Your nervous system isn't confused when it slams the brakes on something that matters to you. It's doing threat math on a much bigger number than it would for something you don't care about at all. That heaviness in your chest right now, reading this, that flat, sunk feeling when you picture the file still open on your desktop, that isn't proof you don't want it badly enough. That's the dorsal vagal state, still quietly running the background, doing exactly the job it was built to do. So how do you interrupt a response that fires before you're even aware of it happening? You don't fight it. You cannot out-argue a survival response. That's asking the oldest part of your nervous system to take instructions from the newest part of your brain, and it will lose every time. What you can do instead is send it different evidence. The freeze holds as long as your body believes it isn't safe to act. So the next time you catch that heaviness, the tea making, the drawer cleaning, the sudden urgent need to do anything except the one thing, stop. Name 3 things you can actually see around you, out loud, if you can manage it. Why would that work? Because it isn't about calm. It's about proof. This is sometimes called orienting, giving your senses a live, current reading to override an alarm that's still running on old information. Your threat system is quietly asking whether it's safe to come back online, and naming what's physically in front of you is the fastest evidence you can hand it that nothing here is actually dangerous. Then, before you touch the real task, do one more thing. Open a blank version of it and write the worst possible first attempt on purpose. Not the true one, the deliberately bad one. Because the freeze was never afraid of the task. It was afraid of being seen doing it well and falling short anyway, or doing it badly and having that mean something about you. A version that was never trying to be good removes that risk before your nervous system has a chance to assess it. There's nothing left to be seen failing at, because you already declared it bad on purpose. If the heaviness doesn't lift the first time, that isn't failure. It's data. Old alarms rarely reset in a single try. They reset the same way they were built in the first place, through repetition. Each time you act while the heaviness is still there, and nothing bad happens. Your body files away a little more evidence that the room really is safe. Eventually, the pattern updates on its own, without you having to talk yourself into anything. Try on the smallest stalled task you're avoiding today. Not the biggest one. The smallest. Name 3 things in a room. Write the bad version on purpose. Watch what happens to the heaviness. You now know what switches this response on, and how to interrupt it once it fires. But you still don't know why certain tasks trip this wire in you, and not in someone else. Why was your particular alarm built to go off at the instant something might be witnessed, when someone sitting right next to you would feel nothing at all? That answer isn't sitting in your nervous system today. It's sitting further back, in a moment you probably don't consciously remember, one that decided, long before you had any say in it, that being seen was something to guard against. Finding it won't come from more willpower, and it won't come from trying harder to remember. It comes from understanding how the encoding happened in the first place. You didn't stall today because you're lazy. You stalled because a long time ago, something taught your body that stillness was safer than being watched, and it had been protecting you from that moment, faithfully, ever since. If you want to know exactly where that protection was built, the next video walks through it. Subscribe if this finally explains something about yourself that never made sense before. And down in the comments, name the task you've been stalling on that has nothing to do with how hard it actually is. Chances are, you're not the only one who recognizes it.